The world watched in horror as the news unfolded. The fragile ceasefire that had been holding between Israel and Hamas was shattered, plunging the region back into chaos. The ceasefire, which had been a beacon of hope for many, collapsed under the weight of renewed hostilities. The images of destruction and despair filled screens worldwide, leaving many to wonder if peace was ever truly attainable. In January 2025, the situation took a dramatic turn for the worse. The breakdown of the ceasefire led to a resurgence of violence in the Gaza Strip, a region already scarred by years of conflict. The streets, once bustling with life, were now scenes of devastation and fear. Families huddled in their homes, praying for safety as the sounds of conflict echoed around them. The situation quickly escalated, with both sides resuming hostilities. Israel launched airstrikes, targeting what they claimed were strategic positions of Hamas. The skies over Gaza were lit up with the flashes of explosions, a grim reminder of the ongoing strife. In retaliation, Hamas responded with rocket fire, sending projectiles into Israeli territory. The cycle of violence seemed unending, with each side blaming the other for the renewed conflict. Former President Donald Trump, known for his often unconventional foreign policy stances, wasted no time in making his position clear. He took to social media and public platforms to voice his unwavering support for Israel. He declared his full support for Israel's actions, stating that the nation had every right to defend itself against what he termed as terrorist aggression. His words were met with both praise and criticism, reflecting the deep divisions in public opinion. This stance was echoed by his former press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, who placed the blame for the renewed conflict squarely on Hamas. She reiterated the administration's long-standing position that Israel had the right to defend itself. Leavitt cited Hamas's October 7, 2023 attack on Israel as the root cause of the ongoing violence. She argued that the international community needed to recognize the threat posed by Hamas and support Israel's right to self-defense. The October 7th attack had been a turning point, a moment that many saw as the catalyst for the current escalation. The memories of that day were still fresh, and the scars it left on both sides were deep. Trump's unwavering support for Israel, even in the face of international criticism, is consistent with his past policies. During his presidency, he had made several moves that were seen as bolstering Israel's position in the region. His administration was known for its close ties with the Israeli government. From moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem to recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, Trump's policies had always favored Israel. Trump's stance has been met with mixed reactions. While some applauded his strong support for an ally, others expressed concern over the potential for further escalation. The international community remained divided, with some calling for restraint and others backing Israel's right to defend itself. Supporters of Trump praised his unwavering stance, seeing it as a sign of strong leadership and loyalty to an important ally. Pro-Israel demonstrations were held, with many expressing gratitude for his continued support. However, there were also voices of concern. Analysts debated the potential consequences of such a strong stance, and peace rallies called for de-escalation and a return to negotiations. The path to peace seemed as elusive as ever, with the world watching and hoping for a resolution. The renewed conflict has resulted in a sharp increase in casualties on both sides. The intensity of the fighting has left many communities devastated, with families torn apart and homes reduced to rubble. Emergency responders are working around the clock, but the sheer scale of the destruction is overwhelming. However, the situation in Gaza is particularly dire. The densely populated area has been hit hard, with infrastructure severely damaged and essential services disrupted. Hospitals are struggling to cope with the influx of injured civilians, and there is a dire shortage of medical supplies. Gaza's civil defense reports paint a grim picture. Rescue workers are tirelessly searching through the rubble for survivors, often risking their own lives in the process. The humanitarian crisis is deepening, with thousands of people displaced and in urgent need of assistance. The death toll has surpassed 500, a significant increase from the previous ceasefire period. This alarming rise in fatalities underscores the brutal nature of the conflict and the heavy toll it is taking on the civilian population. Even more concerning is the rising number of casualties among the most vulnerable: children. Many young lives have been lost, and countless others have been injured or traumatized. The psychological impact on these children will be long-lasting, affecting their futures and the future of the region. Adding to the escalating tensions, Israel expanded its ground operations into Gaza. This move has intensified the conflict, leading to more destruction and loss of life. The presence of ground troops has also heightened fears among the civilian population, who are caught in the crossfire. This move effectively cut off the main north-south route, further isolating the already besieged territory. The blockade has made it nearly impossible for aid to reach those in need, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. The people of Gaza are facing severe shortages of food, water, and medical supplies. Hamas, in retaliation for the Israeli offensive and the mounting casualties, responded with force. Their fighters have launched numerous attacks, further escalating the violence. The cycle of retaliation and counter-retaliation shows no signs of abating, leading to a dangerous and volatile situation. Their rockets targeted Tel Aviv, signaling a dangerous widening of the conflict. The strikes on major cities have raised international concern, with fears that the conflict could spread beyond the region. The international community is calling for an immediate ceasefire and a return to negotiations to prevent further bloodshed. Amidst the escalating violence, there was a glimmer of hope when Hamas announced the release of hostages. American-Israeli hostage Eden Alexander, along with 4 other dual nationals, was freed after discussions with U.S. hostage envoy Adam Boehler. However, this glimmer of hope was short-lived. A leak attributed to Israel exposed the details of these sensitive negotiations. The leak infuriated the Trump administration, which perceived it as a betrayal of trust. The U.S., viewing Hamas's offer as disingenuous and a non-starter, ceased direct talks. This breakdown in communication further dimmed the prospects for a swift resolution. To understand the current crisis, it's crucial to examine Trump's previous involvement in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Trump had initially claimed credit for brokering the January ceasefire. However, his subsequent actions contributed to its unraveling. One of Trump's most controversial proposals involved the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. He envisioned transforming the impoverished and war-torn territory into a lavish Riviera-style resort. This proposal, widely condemned as unrealistic and morally reprehensible, was met with international rejection. Section 5. The U.S. government's stance. The White House, under Trump's leadership, was quick to throw its support behind Israel's renewed bombing campaign. This unwavering support, despite the escalating civilian casualties in Gaza, drew sharp criticism from international human rights organizations. The State Department, while echoing the White House's support for Israel, urged Hamas to accept the Witkoff Bridge proposal. This proposal, named after American businessman Steve Witkoff, aimed to establish a humanitarian corridor into Gaza. However, the proposal lacked concrete details and was viewed with skepticism by many, who saw it as a band-aid solution to a deep-rooted crisis. Section 6. Analyzing Trump's role and criticism. Experts and analysts have been quick to dissect Trump's role in the escalating conflict. His actions and decisions have been under intense scrutiny from various quarters, with many questioning the effectiveness and motivations behind his policies. Josh Rubner of Georgetown University and Anel Shalin of the Quincy Institute have criticized Trump's earlier ceasefire efforts. They argue that his approach lacked a comprehensive strategy and was more about optics than substance. They argue that Trump's primary focus was on securing the release of Israeli captives, rather than achieving a lasting peace. This narrow focus, they claim, undermined broader peace efforts and failed to address the root causes of the conflict. The Center for International Policy went further, placing significant blame on Trump for the collapse of the ceasefire. They believe his actions were not only ineffective but also counterproductive, exacerbating tensions rather than alleviating them. They point to his controversial Gaza proposal and his support for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's attempts to rewrite the terms of the agreement as evidence of his counterproductive approach. Critics argue that these moves were more about political posturing and less about genuine conflict resolution. International reactions have been mixed, with some supporting Trump's hardline stance while others condemn it as reckless. The debate continues as to whether his policies have brought any real progress or simply added fuel to an already volatile situation. As the situation remains fluid, the world watches closely to see if future efforts will build on or diverge from Trump's controversial legacy. The ultimate impact of his actions on the peace process remains a topic of heated debate, among experts and policymakers. Section 7. Humanitarian Crisis and International Condemnation. The escalating conflict has precipitated a dire humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The United Nations has described the situation as catastrophic, with hospitals overwhelmed and basic supplies running dangerously low. International condemnation of the violence has been swift and widespread. The UN Human Rights Council called for an immediate ceasefire and launched an investigation into potential war crimes committed by both sides. Section 8. Implications for the future. The collapse of the ceasefire and the renewed violence have raised serious concerns about the future of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The prospects for a peaceful resolution seem more distant than ever. The international community faces the daunting task of mediating between the two sides and finding a path towards a sustainable peace. Section 9. Conclusion. A bleak outlook for peace. The situation in Gaza remains volatile and dangerous. Trump's unwavering support for Israel's actions, coupled with his controversial past proposals, has further inflamed tensions and complicated efforts to achieve a peaceful resolution. The international community must work together to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and find a lasting solution to this decades-long conflict. The alternative is a continuation of the cycle of violence with devastating consequences for all involved.